At the age of 101, President Russel M. Nelson passes away yesterday, September 27th, 2025. A few thoughts on his life, especially his time as president of the church, that I've gotten from him that I think are important and have made an impact on my life. First of all, I met President Nelson in 1985. He had recently, I believe in 1984, been called to be an apostle along with President Oaks, same day with President Nelson being ordained first and President Oaks second, which was, I believe, the instruction of Spencer W. Kimball at the time. I had a very short conversation with him where he gave a talk along with Elder Packer at a conference. Just, amiable. I don't know him in any way, but had a chance at least to meet with him. Secondly, as a heart surgeon, he helped develop, in fact, was extremely influential in developing the artificial lung for heart surgery. Many of you know that I had a triple bypass several years ago. That was used. That machine was used. There's no way that I could have had this done without that machine being produced. And so in some ways, he saved my life, right? A difficult surgery, obviously, cutting open your chest and ripping it open. And then having the artificial lung work with the blood and the oxygen to allow the surgeons to work and operate on your heart as they sever completely 3 of my arteries, remove portions of that, and put in bypass arteries in their place. Another influential part of my life from President Nelson, but most importantly, I want to talk just a little bit about his personality and the way that he led. I appreciate the way that he works. And this is what I mean by that. He does not operate off of biases. And I think that's really important. That doesn't mean I've agreed with everything he's chosen. Some of you may have had an issue with the COVID response or whatever, temple issue, whatever. I don't know. But I appreciate a man that works directly off of what he believes is what the Lord is revealing to him and what he needs to change and what he needs to work on for the church. And he does it without, how is this going to look? He does it without worrying about biases or political issues he is focused on making certain changes in the church, has been, based on what he believes is right. And I fully believe that that is true. So I really appreciate that. I think that is, when you are someone that tries desperately to follow truth, regardless of your friends, family, and tries to look for things that are, for example, the NAACP. I know so many people have a problem with that. Is the church moving liberal because of this? No. He's creating a relationship that I think is very important. That doesn't mean that he agrees with them politically, right? You can do that. You can walk that edge of the sword and create relationships and be influential in those relationships, even though those are organizations that may have very little in common with you, people that may have very little in common with you. But he finds those commonalities and creates those relationships. And I think that's been a very positive thing with, for example, the NAACP. The other thing I think is that in the same vein where he has looked for revelation directly from the Lord, regardless of pressure, is that he wants us to do the same thing. And so the comments of looking to work by the Spirit, of separating us in many ways from a dependency on the church in so many ways, for checklists like with the For Strength of Youth pamphlet, or home study with Come Follow Me, it's obvious to me that what he's saying is, look, we need to prepare ourselves. We need to become more and stop leaning so much on the church to direct your life. Take control of it. Build a relationship with the Father through prayer, through the Savior in the atonement, and through the Spirit through revelation, in order to become who you need to become and actually step out of the shadow to some degree of the church and be a leader. Be a leader of your surrounding. Be a leader of your community. Be a leader of your family. Be a leader within the church. And that's a really hard thing to do. That's a really hard thing to do because we have been so dependent upon the church in the past. It's like taking the training wheels off and saying, here you go. And you might crash a couple times, but you have to develop the home. And it can't be us instructing you every day what to do. So I really appreciate that from President Nelson. The last thing I'm going to say is his urgency for the second coming and preparing for that. Now, I don't know that, there are a lot of channels that'll go out there and that's what they focus on. And, kind of this hype deal of, is the second coming on Thursday? Is it? But President Nelson is putting a principle in place saying we need to hasten the work. And whether it's temple building and temple work, whether it is becoming independent of dependency on the church, I think that those are very strong principles and necessary principles, even though it is going to cause growing pains for us. I think that it is inspired, and I think it's incredibly brave and courageous for him to put those things out to the church for us to follow. I love President Nelson. Love hearing his words. I have been able to listen to him for 84, so for 41 years in his counsel. Again, here's also a guy who was never in the first presidency, and then boom, all of a sudden was prophet. I think that's interesting. Yeah, I think that in some ways gave him some certain perspective on what he wanted to change. And so when he goes in and he makes all of these changes, I also think it's important to see how he is creating actually a stronger identity in some ways. I think there are other ways where maybe that cultural identity is not as strong, I'll be honest. But in some ways, especially in terms of principles and doctrine, the name of the church, right, is right up there. He's going in and he's tweaking all of these little policies and to move us to a point where we can stand on our own 2 feet and be empowered by the Spirit and by our faith and testimony and covenants, instead of trying to say that all of that power is coming from the church, instead of directly with our relationship with God. And I think that's crucial. And so I am forever grateful for that message from President Nelson. Of course, lastly, his testimony of Jesus Christ, of being a disciple of Christ, right? His identity hierarchy is so crucial. It is child of God, child of the covenant, disciple of Christ. Put a line below that and everything else is below it. And at a time where identity politics has been so strong in the West, and race and gender and sexual orientation and class, all of these different identities, even nationality, are being brought up to the top. And it's throwing everything off. It is definitely coming from the adversary. He is putting things straight there. So very much appreciate all that he has done in his 7.5+ years as a prophet. And I have no doubt that he was called of God and that he was the right man for his time. Thanks for listening.